Airboat wreckage. Originally, we destroyed the airboat in the jump over the dam, so this level opened with the player amidst the wreckage of their beloved airboat. In a team-wide playtest, people felt disappointed to lose the vehicle they had spent so much time in. There was a lot of internal debate about whether that feeling of loss was a valuable experience or not. Ultimately, we decided to leave the airboat intact to allow for the possibility of the player reuniting with it someday. Some say that airboat is still out there, waiting for you.
Alex and Mossman. In our early plans for Half-Life 2's narrative, we wanted to take on the challenge of doing something less explicitly game-focused. Not just a story about the obviously good player defeating the obviously evil enemies. Instead, we aimed to focus on characters and their relationships. We thought it would be interesting to explore family as the central dynamic unit of Half-Life 2. The tension between Alex and Mossman emerged from that idea, and we liked it because it felt relatable, something players could understand and empathize with.
We've got something. Okay, it's human. Hello? Take it easy in there. You're safe now. You'll have to forgive the scanning process. We can't take any chances. Dr. Freeman? Gordon Freeman? Is that you? You've made it here this quickly. Well, Eli is going to be amazed, not to mention relieved. I'm Dr. Mossman, Dr. Judith Mossman. I've been hearing about you since long before the Black Mesa incident. Oh, Black Mesa. I do so envy you working with Eli and Dr. Potter when they were at the top of their field. Ah, there we go. You can come through now. I'll take you down to Eli right away. He would never forgive me if I kept you waiting. We could certainly use the extra help around. We've covered a lot of ground in the last few months, but things would go so much faster if we had more people with your training. We're closing in on a reliable local teleport technology. Something the Combine still hasn't mastered. Eli thinks their portals are string-based, similar to our Calabi-Yau model, but they've failed to factor in the dark energy equations. They can tunnel through from their universe, but once they're here, they're dependent on local transportation. If they knew what we were doing with entanglement... Oh. Listen to me. I sound like a postdoc. I'm just so excited to think that we'll finally have the chance to work together. Where was I? Oh, yes. Dr. Kleiner compressed the Zen relay far beyond anything he imagined at Black Mesa. We've figured out how to use Zen as an unexpressed axis, effectively a dimensional slingshot, so we can swing around the border world and come back in local space without having to pass through. Oh, here's Eli now.
All right, good. You keep right up.
Eli's lab. We built Eli's lab after Dr. Kleiner's, which gave us a better understanding of how to set up and design effective choreo scenes. As a result, we were able to create a more complex scenario with more opportunities for it to respond to the player. Having multiple characters doing their own thing around the room made staging tricky, and it took a lot of iteration and playtesting to get it to run smoothly. Our experience showed that, generally, players wanted to play along with the scene. They just needed enough subtle clues to know where we wanted them. Similarly, if they got distracted, the scene had to gently pause and wait for them to return.
Let me just finish up some work and I'll see what I can dig up.
Feel free to look around. Balancing the player's desire to explore with the narrative goals of the scene was always a challenge. We wanted the room to be full of interesting things to look at, but many players wouldn't explore until they were sure they wouldn't miss any of the character performances. That's why it was important for Eli to tell the player to look around midway through the scene. It signaled that it was safe to explore. From there, we could trigger a variety of custom mini-scenes based on what caught the player's interest.
Hugs and pickups. Sometimes even little things can be a nightmare to get working. For example, getting a character to hug another character, or even more simply, just to pick up an object from a table can cause a lot of issues. Even worse, in our dynamic environment, where the characters and objects aren't in preset positions, and the players running around getting in the way, these require a level of synchronization that can be quite tricky. They're made harder because humans handle them without thinking. As you're moving to the table to pick up a cup, you're doing all kinds of preparation with your body to get your feet and hands in the right position to allow to do it comfortably. Everything ready right when you get there. If you're moving in to hug somebody, you're both doing it at the same time, adjusting constantly based on each other's movement. To get these features to work in the game involved a lot of synchronization work, making characters aware of each other and the world, and at the same time, getting them to know more about their future plans. It's tempting to want to break up, pick up a cup example into discrete steps. Walk to the table, face cup, pick up a cup, because it's much simpler that way, and it makes the steps nicely reusable. But that's how robots work, not humans. Our characters had to know they were moving to a table with the intention to pick up a cup, so they could work on multiple parts of it simultaneously, making sure their hand grabs the cup right when they get there. With two characters, it's even more of a negotiation. Both need to agree where and when it's going to happen, and everything needs to happen in place in a seamless fashion. While these moments of simple interaction with their characters in the world are often short, they were critical to making them seem like believable people.
Are you blaming?
We want to put this dense chunk of visual story here because it's the place the game is most explicit at telling players to explore a space. Even though its primary job is world building, we still take strides to highlight the relationship between Eli and Breen, giving context to the world's central conflict.
Sure. Come on, Gordon. Let's go have some fun.
The zero-point energy field manipulator is not a toy, Alex.
Ugh, let's get out of here. So I see you've met Dr. Mossman.
Mossman. Judith Mossman was originally based on a character we had planned for a section of Half-Life 1. That section was cut from the base game and reused in Uplink, but without the character. We consider her the most complex character in Half-Life 2. We knew we'd be walking a tightrope with how the player felt about her even before Nova Prospect, because the player's trusted sources don't agree. Eli likes her, but Alex doesn't. We recognized there was a limit to how much complexity we could pull off in relationships, but we felt that a stepmother-daughter dynamic was something players would understand. Whether or not you agree with Mossman, she's doing something heroic. She risks being a double agent to get the information she needs to protect Eli and Alex. She just didn't plan for Gordon.
Mr. Ravenholm. We don't go there anymore. So, here we are. The scrapyard.
Character lighting. In the first year of development, we were struggling to get our characters to feel as realistic as we wanted them to. There were actually quite a number of different problems, all of which eventually required specific technological and artistic improvements to fix. The first major problem was lighting. At the time, lighting technology in games had many shortcuts, some due to performance, but many due to misunderstandings of how it all works. To make characters look good at the time, models and textures had to be created with much of their lighting solution baked into them, like shadows and glossiness. The characters looked cool, but they also looked like video game characters. We started building Alex with this approach, because that was how you were supposed to do it. We used the baked solutions and lit her like a movie actor, essentially as if she had a custom lighting rig that followed her around and ensured she always looked good. But it didn't really work. The range of lighting environments and the dynamic nature of video games meant that she'd look great in some environments, but always end up looking terribly unrealistic at some point. We tried iterating on our lighting rig, increasing its capabilities, but eventually it felt like we were at a dead end. Returning to the drawing board, we decided to try a different approach. We built her and the lighting and the textures from the ground up, throwing everything away, focusing on not on what we wanted her to look like under ideal lighting, but on how things were supposed to work in the real world. It might seem obvious, but it wasn't how it was done, at least not in video games. When looked at outside the game's renderer, these models and textures actually looked worse than the previous versions, but we managed to methodically pull out all the shortcuts and misconceptions about how light and texture and graphics cards worked and put it all back together. After all that was done, when we were finally able to look at Alex in-game with her new models and textures in a dynamic environment that kept her visually consistent at all times, well, she looked great. Totally seamless and part of the Half-Life 2 world. Character lighting. Facial technology. We wanted players to care about our characters, and to even have a chance at achieving that, we knew we had to invest a lot of technology for our characters' faces. It's well understood that humans are wired to pay attention to faces, subconsciously reading all kinds of information from them, so it's an extremely high bar, and if we couldn't reach it, we'd probably push players away from our characters, not towards them as we hoped. We started out doing a lot of research. It was not heartening. The best examples we could find weren't anywhere near close to being able to be run in real time, while the best real-time ones weren't close to the quality we wanted. We wanted to look as good as an animated movie, but they often took hours to render frames and were totally linear, authored by up to 100 animators, whereas ours had to be dynamic. A character might be trying to speak dialogue or a facial move derived from a player's actions and created by just a handful of artists. These requirements eventually led us to Dr. Paul Ekman's facial acting coding system, a system for taxonomizing human facial movements done back in the 1970s. It gave us a vocabulary for describing facial movements throughout our tools and code, and a target to aim for when designing our characters' faces. With it as a framework, we started a many-year process of iterating on how we built faces and heads of our characters. Where others had tried taking bits of Ekman's work, we wanted to try to use it all. That meant a lot of time spent figuring out how to do each piece within the tight performance constraints we had. But we also spent a lot of time just looking at people and faces, trying to find the extra features that would add the most value, like skin elasticity, teeth shadowing. In the end, while we weren't able to do everything we wanted, we did manage to get the pieces we thought were the most important to a convincing facial performance level on our characters. Eye shader. Another critical part of getting character faces to be convincing was in the eyes. Humans are great at reading eyes. There's a part of your brain dedicated to it, down to knowing where somebody is looking based on the reflections on the eyeballs. But there are all kinds of subtleties that matter. Eyes aren't actually spheres. Eyelids get distorted by the cornea moving around underneath. Eye movement can increase the odds of blinking. Eyes don't actually line up directly behind the pupil. They're shifted slightly. All these little details might feel small or unnoticeable, but the absence hurts the believability of the character. We worked on eyes for a long time, iterating our eyeball model and feature set little by little. Some things required external interfaces, like what things in the environment were interesting to look at, where others were automatic, at a subconscious level in the AI, like blinking, an obvious requirement, but one that's subtly confusing if it's wrong. Eye reflections had a particularly large impact. They're ultimately a tiny amount of real estate on the screen, but the difference they made was enormous. We knew we were finally done when we reached the point where, with our eye shader off, a character looked like a doll, human-like, but unconvincing in some way that was hard to describe. But when we turned it on, suddenly it felt like a human was looking at us.
All right. See if you can stack some stuff to climb up here.
Moving the gravity gun. When the gravity gun was first prototyped, we planned to give it to the player midway through the game. But as playtesting progressed, we saw the strength of its design and realized the gravity gun and, more importantly, the ability to launch saw blades at zombie faces needed to come earlier. That meant Eli's lab also needed to move earlier too. It was a significant change, but it was crucial to Half-Life 2's success. It serves as a good reminder that storytelling and gameplay are intertwined, and neither can always take priority. They have to work together.
Now let me call Dog. He loves to play fetch. Dog!
Risk. Looking back on Half-Life 2 now, 20 years later, it's sobering to reflect on how terrifying it was throughout much of the development. Game development is hard. You never really get what you'd like to have, which is be able to validate risk before you start to pile more on top of it. For example, our facial animation technology, it took probably 3 or 4 years of work before we were confident it was actually going to work. But we couldn't wait until then. In that first year, we immediately started making all kinds of other choices in our game design, our asset production, and our other technologies, all based on the assumption that our facial animation technology was going to work in the end, from a quality and performance standpoint. If it hadn't, many of those other choices wouldn't have worked either. At the same risk profile is true of other large choices we made early on. We can't wait. We just have to build and hope that our guesses will be true years from now. Terrifying.
Another one, dog. Awesome. Go ahead, dog. Throw. Excellent. Dog, go get your ball. Good throw. Nice shot. No, dog. No, no, boy. Down. Put that down. What is it, dog? Oh my god, what was that? Scanners! Combine sweeping the area. Gotta head back to the lab. Come on, Gordon. Do you read?
Alex! Honey?
What's going on in there?
Where are you, Alex?
We're in the scrapyard airlock, stuck in a full auto cycle.
Is Gordon still with you?
He's right here.
Good. I want you to...
Dad?
Take Gordon out of here. Head for the coast. Do not go through rape.
Dad? Dad! Damn it! Dog, open the airlock. Get us out of here. Hurry, now! Tear it apart, you have. Just get it open! That's enough, dog. Come on, Gordon! Come on! Gordon, you need to get out of here. I can't leave my father. Dog! Take Gordon to the Ravenholm tunnel, then circle around and try to meet up with me. Hurry!